There was an outbreak of the TSJ virus. The virus became increasingly devastating, as all prevention measures failed. The entire city was gripped by fear as people scrambled for ways to protect themselves. Lucio, a man still grieving the recent death of his wife in a car accident, was persuaded by his sister Belen to join her and her family at a safe hideout where the virus hadn't reached. The next day, Lucio arrived at the airport to catch a flight and meet Belen. After long delays, he learned that all flights had been cancelled, and mobile phones were blocked from the internet due to the virus. Chaos erupted at the airport. Lucio received a call from Belen, urging him to return home and lock himself in. He left the airport, but the roads were jammed with traffic. Frustrated, he decided to trek home on foot. As he passed a checkpoint, he saw infected people being isolated, which only deepened his confusion and fear. When he finally got home, the sight of the city's collapse further unsettled him. The next morning, Belen called again, explaining that they were organizing safe zones and quarantine areas to redistribute the population. She pleaded with Lucio to stay indoors, no matter the circumstances. He was scrolling through his phone when he found that even the internet was blocked, and TV broadcasts were cut off. Lucio went outside to gather some food, knowing he wouldn't be able to leave the house again for a while. When he arrived at the mall, it was already empty. People had taken whatever supplies were left. Lucio grabbed what he could, but as he left, the streets were in chaos. Infected people were attacking and devouring the uninfected security guards. Lucio rushed home and barricaded himself inside. That night, some soldiers arrived, offering to rescue any uninfected survivors. Lucio, remembering his sister's advice, stayed put. Days passed, and Lucio's food supply dwindled. Desperate, he ventured out again, breaking into houses in search of food. It wasn't until he found an elderly woman in one of the houses that he received some help. She gave him directions to a place where he could find supplies. They communicated through walkie-talkies from their separate apartments. But days later, Lucio lost contact with the old woman. He went to check on her and found she had passed away. Heartbroken, he left the house, only to be attacked by an infected person. Using the weapon he had, Lucio fought it off. Later that day, he decided to head to Canary Island, where the old woman had told him other survivors were. On the way, he was ambushed by infected people. He raced to escape, but his bike crashed into the sand. He tried to continue on foot, but the infected were closing in. He ran to a nearby boat harbor, where he found a faulty boat, and decided to use an engine-powered canoe instead. Late that night, Lucio found a large ship with survivors aboard. He called for help, and they rescued him, offering him refuge. But things weren't as they seemed. The men aboard the ship were using captured survivors as prisoners. Lucio tried to confirm this with his friend Victor, a pilot who was among the ship's leaders, but received no clear answers. That night, Lucio attempted to free some prisoners but was caught by a guard. Just as the guard prepared to shoot, Victor intervened and saved him. Lucio killed the guard, and they fled the ship, escaping in an engine-powered canoe. As they made their way downriver, more guards attacked. Lucio and Victor fought them off, but Victor was shot in the arm. Barely escaping, Lucio and Victor reached an abandoned car at the end of the river. They decided to drive to a nearby hospital to find a helicopter that would take them to Canary Island. At the hospital, they were attacked by infected people, but Lucio managed to defend them both. Inside the building, Lucio searched for medical supplies to treat Victor's wound. While doing so, he overheard voices coming from upstairs. When he tried to communicate with them, his voice attracted the attention of nearby infected, who began hunting him. With help from the people upstairs, Lucio was able to find safety. Lucio begged the nurse to treat Victor, explaining that the helicopter was their only hope for escaping. While Victor was being treated, Lucio and the nurse made a plan to reach the helicopter, which was surrounded by infected. Later, the men from the ship arrived at the hospital, looking to secure the helicopter. Lucio saw them and rushed to warn the others. Together, they took a hidden tunnel to avoid the infected. When they reached the last door, they found it locked from the outside. They used an axe to break the door down, but the noise attracted an infected person, who attacked and bit one of the nurses. The bitten nurse told them to leave her behind, as she was already infected. They moved on, making their way to the final door leading to the helicopter. Lucio checked and saw a horde of infected people outside. He suggested they use the hospital's wheelchairs to move silently, but as they crossed the room, the wheels hit an iron object, making a loud noise that drew the attention of the infected. They rushed to the helicopter, but Victor, in his panic, couldn't remember how to start it. As infected climbed the iron fence, Lucio jumped down to kill some of them and buy Victor more time. The helicopter's engine roared to life, attracting the attention of armed men who had followed them from the ship. The armed men threatened them, but Lucio opened the iron gate, letting the infected swarm the soldiers. With the armed men distracted, Victor took off in the helicopter, while Lucio killed the last of the infected. After clearing the area, he climbed into the helicopter, and they escaped.